in New York City, as well as through NGOs and nonprofits across the country. Here in our shelters, because we know that there are people in our shelters who are telling their family members to come to New York City and that they'll get housing and that they'll be able to stay with them. That has never been the case, but we want to make sure that we're being clear with people that New York City is out of space. We'll also share this with other municipalities at the border and across the country. While we are working to slow the front door, we're also working to increase exits from the shelter system through intensive case management, our work authorization sprint, and our 30-day notices. I'll now pass it to Dr. Long for an update on those case management efforts and a few words about what he's been seeing on the ground at the Arrival Center over the past few days. Dr. Long?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So as the Deputy Mayor said, we are seeing a sharp increase in the number of asylum seekers coming into New York City every day. This will continue to strain our already strained system. Today, though, I want to talk about some of our larger strategies that, as the Deputy Mayor said, will be our path forward. And for so much of this, the backbone will be case management. The first thing that we're doing now is we're currently undertaking a census where we're asking the same set of questions to every asylum seeker at every part of our system, from our DHS system to our H&H humanitarian centers or HERCs. Those questions include what stage of the process you're in with respect to seeking asylum and work authorization, and what barriers you still have that with our help you might be able to surmount and be able to complete your journey, taking the next step forward and leaving our system. To date, we've completed these assessments on nearly 70% of all of the asylum seekers across our entire system. That's going to form the basis of the case management program that we are now launching, called our Red, Yellow, Green program. This program is going to have people in the green color category if you have a few barriers that our case managers can work with you and overcome fairly quickly so that, again, you can take your next step forward and leave our system. Yellow means you have a few more barriers. We're going to work with you on it and give you the help that you need. Red means that you have more intensive barriers and therefore might require a referral, for example, to a lawyer. We're going to be having multiple touch points with every asylum-seeking household each month as the program ramps up. Another way that we've leveraged case management so far is as it pertains to our 60-day policy. Now, our 60-day policy is not just a time limit for asylum seekers. It's a deadline for us as a city to be able to help asylum seekers to take their next step forward and exit our city system. The first group of people that we gave out 60-day notices to had day 61 occur this past Friday. So looking at those whose day 61 was this past Friday through early this week, because of our help on day 61, less than half of those still under our care on day 61 needed to come back to the Arrival Center for another placement in our city system. The majority of asylum seekers that were still with us on day 61, due to the help that we'd given them over the past 60 days, were able to take their next step forward, exit our system, and not need to re-enter for another placement. Today, I want to say a couple of things also about the future directions we're going in for work authorization and temporary protected status. For work authorization, the census we're doing lets us target resources by knowing where you are in the asylum application process, whether you've completed the 589 form, if you then have to wait the 5-month period if you're ready to complete the 765 or work authorization form. We're finding that some people have it's already been 5 months. So we can immediately intervene, even with teams on site today, help you to complete the work authorization form and then make an appointment at our application center so that you can submit that form and get work authorization as quickly as possible. Same thing if you came across the border using the CBP One app. We're going to know that through the census we're doing, and part of our case management strategy is going to immediately connect you to completing the work authorization paperwork that you're eligible for on site and have it submitted for you as fast as possible. For temporary protected status, this is an announcement that the federal government made last week. What I wanted to say about this today is that the announcement is that Venezuelans within a certain time period will have the ability to apply for temporary protected status, but it's not currently live. So what we're doing to prepare for that is we're using our census to determine who is likely eligible in terms of those coming from Venezuela within that certain time period, and using our census data, we're going to know all of that. And then we're going to have teams ready to leap into action to connect with those individuals as soon as they can submit their temporary protected status applications, which are concurrently submitted with the work authorization applications, so they can work as fast as humanly possible. We estimate today that we still have about 22,000 Venezuelans that likely meet that criteria in our system, so we'll be able to engage with them immediately when the temporary protected status applications go live. So in sum, I just wanted to say the case management and all of these connections to how we can help asylum seekers to get the specific help and services they need so they can take their next step forward and leave our system is an important new direction that we're taking now at this stage of the crisis. With that, back to you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Ted. As Dr. Long mentioned, despite the surge we've been seeing, we're keeping our eyes on our long-term plan. I want to remind everyone, we're dealing with the crisis, but we're also long-term planning. We know that the only way that we're going to get out of this crisis is getting people connected with the support they need so that they can move out of shelter and build stable and self-sufficient lives. But as we've always said, we cannot do this alone. This surge shows just how important additional financial resources and a consistent decompression strategy are to successfully addressing this humanitarian crisis. I'm hopeful that the state and federal governments will see this and step in and lean in more to that. Finally, I want to share an update on the news, as Dr. Long did, on the Biden administration last week extending temporary protocol status for a subset of Venezuelans in our care. It's a little confusing, so I want to walk through it again. I want to echo Mayor Adams by saying to you all that we are so grateful for what the president did and for his team for taking this very important step. It is a big deal. When we heard the news last week, our teams immediately got to work, and thankfully with our Asylum Seeker Application Help Center up and running, we have a strong infrastructure in place to help us identify and figure out who the eligible asylum seekers are and help them to fill out the proper paperwork once the federal government finalizes a rule. Our current plan is to try and have people apply for TPS, work authorization, and complete the waiver application, 3 separate forms at the same time to best manage the process. Remember, these forms are dozens of pages that people need to fill out, along with numerous photocopies, translations, and supporting documents. So we want to make sure to be efficient and effective as possible during this process. We're also working with our federal partners to hopefully ease some of the bureaucracy around this process and make sure that people can get work authorization as quickly as possible. As many of you know, there's a fee associated with submitting these applications online. And while we hope that the federal government will waive these, last week we immediately reached out to philanthropy and business partners to see if we can have them contribute to help subsidize those costs. Logistically, TPS extension is a rule that needs to go through the federal government process to be registered. We expect this to take a few weeks, but we're doing everything that we can right now to hit the ground running when that rule is registered. We have also asked the federal government to issue work authorizations based on pending TPS applications rather than waiting until the TPS applications are fully approved, which we know can take months or even years. With all that said, I'll now turn to our data update. As of September 24th, we have over 115,200 people in our care, including over 61,400 asylum seekers. Over 118,800 asylum seekers have come through our intake system since last spring. We have opened 210 sites, including 17 humanitarian relief centers. And last week, from September 18th to September 24th, more than 3,000 new asylum seekers entered our care. New York is and always will be a city of immigrants, and we will always do our part to contribute to this national crisis. But one city cannot support tens of thousands of asylum seekers without additional state and federal partners with no end in sight. This is an effort that needs reinforcement in the form of financial support, a comprehensive decompression strategy, and a declaration of a federal emergency to unlock faster support from Washington. With that, I'll open up the floors to questions.
Deputy Mayor, so yesterday the city asked the court to revise its initial motion to change right to shelter, but it wasn't exactly clear what the city is asking for now. Can you give us an idea of what the contents of that request will be?
Sure, I will let the judge ask, but what I will say, I won't put words in her mouth, but I will say clearly the status quo cannot stay the way it is. So, Judge, would you like to answer that?
Yesterday, I'm sure you all know that we went to court on the Callahan issue, And our initial request for the court and in our initial letter was with reference to modification. Let me make it clear, we never asked to get rid of the right to shelter. Yesterday, the judge that was handling that matter recused, and so we are now with a new schedule to present a specific document to the court that we have to present by October 3rd on the requests that the city is making. And so while we are now in the process of looking at that, I wouldn't tell you what our litigation strategy is going to be, but we will abide by the court's request and have that sent by October 3rd. And I'm sure you'll get a copy of that document.
And I think that sometimes, Judge, when I think about it, when we first...
Some of you will be seeing a 2-minute break right here on Live Now from Fox. Stay right here with us.
Ago.
Yeah.
So it is clear to everyone, I think every single New Yorker, that the status quo cannot continue.
And well, clearly our position is that we want the court to look at where we are now. Everybody knows this is a document that worked 40 years ago. We're quite clear that what we have is not sustainable. And so that's going to be one of the issues that we're going to be dealing with.
Thank you. Sorry, Dr. Long, when was the census begun? How many staffers or volunteers are involved in collecting the information? A little more about the questionnaire and what you keep tabs on, please.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for asking. So we started to do this census a couple of weeks ago. So it is remarkable that we've been able to achieve almost 70% of the totality of all the asylum seekers across all of our city systems in just a matter of weeks. And the staff that are doing it are our existing staff, but we've also brought in agencies like PEU that have stepped up to help us to be able to move as fast as we can. Because again, this data really comprises the basis for how we're going to do the effective case management to be able to connect people to the specific things that they need, the help that they need in order to be able to leave our system. In terms of the number of staff that are working on this, it is hundreds. And that is staff from my teams and again, staff from PEU. But we're making it a very concerted effort intentionally because this is also a way to speed up and go as fast as possible to identify who is eligible for work authorization, have them complete that paperwork, which again, I said, at our larger sites, we're even starting on site to not miss a single moment to enable people to work as quickly as possible.
Yeah, can I just clarify? You said census, you mean survey?
So
We've been always looking at the census, but this is a new sprint, survey sprint. So just say that again. Yeah, please.
We'll call it an assessment survey. And so to answer your question about that, so at the Arrival Center, we've collected similar information since the Arrival Center opened in May of this past year. So for example, when you came to the Arrival Center, you may have said if you came in May that you hadn't completed the 589 form yet. Okay. So at the time, we would have educated you about what it is and how to complete it. But this is following up to see, did you complete it now? And also, if you completed it in May, right after we talked to you, for example, you may be soon eligible to submit, because that 150 days is almost passed, may be nearing eligibility to submit your work authorization paperwork. So having real-time data now is the most precise way to know who is eligible to submit their work authorization paperwork, both from when you submitted the 589 form for asylum, which you may have told us you hadn't submitted at the time, to who now has come through the across the border using the CBP One app. So that enables us to basically just to target our resources right now to move as fast as we can. Also, in this survey, we're asking questions about the barriers that you currently have to be able to leave. Those barriers can change over time. You may have intended to stay with your brother in Chicago. That might have fallen through. Maybe there was a sister in LA. So right now, again, by us collecting all this data now, it powers our ability to have effective case management because we know going into case management, generally what you need, if you're red, yellow, or green, starting with the greens, seeing what help we can offer you immediately so that we can, in the most expeditious way, help you to be able to have the help to leave our system.
Hi, two things, guys. So the first one is that Governor Greg Abbott said today that they've only bused around 15,800 migrants to New York City. What do you guys kind of think of that number? And if not from Texas, where else are they being bused from? And then the second thing I was hoping to ask is, Last week, the mayor said that the number of Venezuelans was about 15,000, and then they narrowed that down to 9,000. So where are we getting the 22,000 number now? And the state has been saying that they're not getting accurate numbers either. So just trying to see, do you guys have like a shared database that you guys are putting these numbers? And is that something that reporters can eventually access as well?
Ooh, there's a lot of questions. So, Abbott, I don't know what I want to say about the accuracy of his buses and all that other kind of stuff. I hope that when he's here, he can get a glimpse of what it really looks like to deal with the humanitarian crisis in a humane way. We've talked to you before that we know that we get buses from El Paso and other places when they're trying to decompress on their own. So we know that we're getting buses from other cities. We know that other people are coming here from Chicago, from Denver, from other parts of the United States. When if there's time limits in other places or they feel like they can't find work, then they come to New York City. So we know that it comes from all different places. So we know that when we looked last week, that remember, we're only talking about Venezuelans who've come since July 31st. So when sometimes people are like, how many Venezuelans do you have? That total number could be different than the amount that are eligible for this particular program. So I want us to be careful about what we're saying and the questions that we're asking for. So I also know that my friend from Immigration Coalition was talking about 60,000, and he clarified today, he was talking about 60,000 throughout the state, right? And then there's numbers like 150,000 people have done the CBP app. That's throughout the United States. So we'll get you very clear numbers. And so we have been working very closely with the state. They've been great partners on helping us really look at our data, look at the case management. And I just want to go back to something that Dr. Long said. These are people that we're dealing with, so circumstances change. So we want to keep good case practice is about going back to people and doing that management so that you can see where they are, so that you can connect them to what they need to be connected to. So I'm happy that we have that infrastructure in order to do that. But of all people, when you're getting 3,000 people a week, all of that gets complicated. But I'm super proud of the way the team has been doing this work.
Can I add one thing to that too? Just in terms of the number itself, as we said, we're doing this comprehensive assessment census right now to be able to give you the most precise, and for us to be able to use the most precise numbers in terms of understanding where people are in the process, the proportion of people that have come through the CBP1 app, the proportion of people that are Venezuelan meeting that criteria. So we're 70% through the census now, so the number could change again, but that's okay. The important thing is for us to get the correct, not just the correct number, but know where everybody is that we'll be immediately reaching out to when they can start to submit their temporary protected status applications. That's why we're doing the census.
Thanks. Can you give us an update on how many 60-day/30-day notices have gone out? And of the people that have had to leave so far starting Friday, how many people is that? What's that number? And have they all gotten intensive case management, or can you give me a number of intensive case management that has been given to people who have these 60-day notices, if that makes sense?
It does.
Ted, do you have those numbers in front of you?
I was going to start with your last question and back into the first numerical one.
Okay.
While we pull up the data.
I got it.
Excuse me. So the last part of your question was, when we talk about intensive case management, who are we referring to? And I was careful in my remarks to say we intentionally started to do the 60-day notices at one site, one of my sites. At that site, it was paired with intensive case management, and that's why over time we actually saw some people be able to leave before day 60. But in particular, when we reached day 61, we did, when people were nearing day 61, 3 days ahead, we again talked to people, saw where they were, see what help they needed. So that approach resulted in the data that I shared with you, which is representative of just that one site, because every 61st day that's hit so far is pretty much just at that one site. Yes, going forward. Very good, Gwen. Going forward, at the different sites, because we do have a diverse system, people may have had different experiences with case management than they did at the sites that I'm in control of. But what I can say is that the goal moving forward is when we've launched our new case management program, which is being launched now. So if you go to many sites now, they've never heard of this before. The intention of this new program is to be able to give everybody the same experience with 2 touch points per household per month at every part of our system. Doesn't exist today, but we're collecting the data to power the program so that when it is fully launched, we'll be able to be off to a running start.
And the numbers are, let's see, 13,500 people have received a 60-day notice, and approximately 690 people have received a 30-day notice.
And sorry, how many have had the time up? How many people?
Several hundred. Sorry.
I wanted to follow up on Morgan's question. Whether you call it an assessment, a survey, whatever, will you commit to releasing today the aggregated results as well as the questions, the exact questions that were asked? That's the first question. Second, potentially for the judge, for the purposes of the 60-day or the 30-day notice, once the folks get their TPS situation resolved and are TPS beneficiaries, will the city treat them any differently from the traditional homeless population in New York? And if you will, what's the legal basis for treating them differently?
I don't even understand the question. So I'm gonna, can I do the first one?
Yeah.
So we're gonna give you the data as we always have when we have it and when we're ready to share it to make sure that it's as accurate as we need it to be. And so I'm not gonna commit today to give you something. I know what you asked me to do was to commit to give you something. I said, I'm not committing today to give you anything. I think what we've done always, and what I've done pretty effectively, we've told you we're going to open an arrival center. We come back and we tell you what's happening and how it's going. We told you we were going to open a legal clinic. We come back and we give you the numbers. We are in the process of making sure that we have all of our numbers scrubbed. You know, the other day we were talking about somebody who was living in Ecuador, who wrote down on the form that they were from Ecuador, and it turned out, but originally they were from Venezuela. So we want to make sure that all that we're giving and how accurate the numbers are, and we'll do that when the time comes. So that's what I'm going to say. I will let you know.
When just to say, I will commit to using the data to help the asylum seekers in our system. It's not just about statistics. This is how we know what help people need and how we're going to effectively use case management to target resources to enable people to get the specific help that they need. That I know it's not what you're asking, but that is the most important thing.
And then the second question.
And throughout, the second question is, what would the city do? And I will say to you that the city will commit and continue to follow the legal process it has been following in view of the fact that we are currently in several pieces of litigation. It depends on what a court determination is and what directive we're given from the court. And based on that, that is the procedure that the city will follow.
We're just tight on time.
I know, but can I just follow up to just one follow-up? If you're relying on data, like you just said, you're going to rely on the data, which means it's in a form that you can rely on. Why can't we get the data that you are relying on?
So the way that
Nope. Asked and answered.
You have an answer.
Yeah.
Asked and done.
Let's not be rude to each other. Don't say he dodged it. I got it.
So just following up on Matt's question. So I guess in response, though, the mayor the other day had told us that there was 15,000 Venezuelans that were eligible for TPS. Now you're saying it's 22,000.
Yep.
So the reason why we're asking, imploring to release this data is that when court rulings come out, when TPS designation change, we need to tell the public how this actually affects them, and I think it wasn't properly communicated with the public last week with the TPS.
So Craig,
will you commit when this is done?
Craig, I'm not unclear why you asked the question. I think we answered it. I understand.
Okay, could you? So.
I mean, do you have?
No, I mean, my question was going to be on TPS. You're getting ready for this sprint of
Yep.
getting people their work authorizations. So now it's 22,000, up from 10,000 last week. How long will it take to get these 22,000 people their work authorizations, the paperwork, your side of things, not the federal side?
Yeah, so what I explained was that we're waiting for the rule to be registered. And once the rule is registered, I'm really happy that we have the infrastructure of the asylum seeker legal clinic that we stood up, that we didn't have to stand up, that we decided that we wanted to do. We've gotten over 4,600 people signed up for their asylum application. Now we're working. We have the federal government here this week that's with us, that's working and doing that sprint also. And so we think that we've been, with the 4,600 applications that we started just in the end of June, having hundreds of people working on this, I think we've been able to do it very quickly. We also know that once they get that designation, it doesn't necessarily mean that they can work right away. So we're trying to make sure that they can work right away. And we're trying to make sure that the process, which can usually, Craig, take sometimes months and years, that we are able to connect people as quickly as possible. I just want, I feel good about New York City this is a humanitarian crisis, right? We've gotten over 118 15,000 people here. New York City is doing it. We are feeding people. We are clothing people. We are housing people. We are trying to connect people to legal services. We are working with hundreds of community-based organizations and clergy in order to get this done. And so we are going to continue to do that good work that we're doing so that we have exit strategies so people can get connected to what they need to and they can get resettled. We've been doing 3 jobs. We've been doing a federal job, I've been doing the state job of resettling folks, and we're doing the city part of this job. We would like other people to step up and support us.
And I just want to add to that too, Craig, if I may. It's from a case management point of view, this is not something that you can effectively do in 24 hours and determine where somebody's going to spend the next several years of their life. What we're doing now is we're doing the survey or assessment first, and in the last couple of weeks we've completed tens of thousands.
Yeah.
So we're moving very fast here, and the state has supported us and given us $20 million to do this case management work going forward. So I don't want to diminish the